I watched the timer tick down, each second dragging like wet cement. The hum of the other machines faded into the background until all I could hear was washer 7 thrashing like something alive inside. The wet slapping sound had grown louder, rhythmic, almost deliberate. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just a weird mechanical quirk. Judy said, "The machines sometimes start themselves. Maybe this was just one of those rare occurrences." I circled the washer, careful to keep my distance. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice, then stabilized. My stomach tightened. Rule 4, count to 30 before moving if the lights flicker 3 times. They hadn't yet, but the thought made my fingers twitch. My pulse was faster than it should have been for a laundromat. I thought about calling Judy, but the card said nothing about reporting spontaneously starting machines, just leave them alone. And yet the sound, the wet, heavy thud inside felt wrong, alive somehow. I leaned closer to the glass, squinting. There was movement, sure, but it didn't look like normal clothes tumbling. Shapes twisted in the suds, darker than fabric, shifting like shadows. My rational mind screamed at me, "It's lint, it's shadows, it's a trick of the light." But the rhythm of the thumping was wrong. It wasn't random, it was measured, intentional. Then the machine stopped. Silence slammed into me so suddenly I jumped. The timer read 0. The door clicked, locked tight. I waited, my breath caught in my throat. Nothing. No sound of dripping water, no hum of motors winding down, just the stale, damp smell of the laundromat and the faint metallic tang that made the air taste sharp in my mouth. I shouldn't have moved. I knew it, remembered the rules, but the curiosity, call it foolishness or just human instinct, won. I reached for the handle, thumb hovering over the latch. The instant my skin touched the cold metal, a thump slammed into the door from the inside, hard, heavy, like something hitting it with purpose. My hand jerked back, and a low, wet groan rattled from the drum. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Washer 7 wasn't a machine anymore, not in the sense I understood. Something had started, and it was waiting. I backed away toward the folding table, staring at the glass as if it could tell me what was happening. The sound stopped. The drum was still. The cycle over. But I didn't believe it, and I knew deep down that Rule 1 was about more than just machines. I didn't sleep that night, sitting behind the counter, staring at washer 7 like it might strike again. The next night, I arrived at Sutty's at 11:50, feeling the weight of yesterday pressing on my shoulders. The fluorescent hum greeted me like an old, indifferent friend. I slid into my polo and name tag, avoiding the eyes of Judy Sanders. She gave me the same flat nod she always did. No warnings, no advice, just a quiet, unshakable expectation. By midnight, the laundromat was nearly empty. One man at dryer 6, headphones in, staring blankly at his phone. A teenager folding towels, humming off-key to a song I didn't recognize. Everything was ordinary. Ordinary enough that I almost forgot the terror of washer 7. Almost. Then, just after 2 a.m., I heard it. A faint creak from the back storage room, subtle at first like the building settling. I froze mid-step, the sound repeating. A slow scrape along concrete, then another. Rhythmic, deliberate. My chest tightened. Rule 2, if you hear sounds from the back storage room between 2 and 4 a.m., ignore them completely. Do not investigate. Do not open the door. I swallowed hard, fingers tightening on the mop handle I'd grabbed absent-mindedly. The sounds grew louder, now accompanied by faint thuds like heavy objects being dragged. I pressed my back to the folding table, pretending to sweep, pretending to be busy. But I couldn't look away. Minutes passed. The rhythm didn't change. My mind raced. Maybe it was just an old storage cart tipping over. Maybe a raccoon had found its way inside. Maybe it wasn't anything at all. Rational thoughts collided with instinct. The primal warning telling me to run, to flee this quiet, humming prison. At 3:15, the sound stopped. Absolute silence. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, no, twice, then stabilized. I hadn't moved, hadn't breathed properly. The air was thick, heavy with damp detergent and the faintly coppery scent that seemed to seep from the walls. I was alone, except for the man at dryer 6. His headphones hadn't moved. He didn't even glance up. Curiosity, stubborn and foolish, pulled me to the storage door. Rule 2 screamed in my mind, "Do not open!" Yet my hand brushed the handle, trembling. A shiver ran through me as a low, wet groan echoed from inside, followed by a scraping thump that made the floor vibrate beneath my feet. I yanked my hand back, heart hammering, and stumbled into the aisle between washers. I watched the door for the next 45 minutes, but nothing moved. The storage room remained closed, quiet, silent. Yet the impression stayed, burned into my mind. Something lives back there, something that shouldn't be here. By 4:15, the teen had left. The man at dryer 6 had finished. I was alone with washer 7, the storage room, and the quiet dread that filled the air like a living thing. That night, I didn't just watch the machines. I listened, waiting, knowing the rules weren't suggestions. They were survival. The third night began with a brittle quiet that seemed heavier than the previous evenings. By 11:45, I was behind the counter, counting change and trying to convince myself that nothing from the last 2 nights had been real. Washer 7 was dark and silent, obedient, almost mocking. Around 12:30, I felt a familiar pressure in the air, like the laundromat was holding its breath. The hum of the other machines sounded sharper, more metallic. I made my usual rounds, checking washers and dryers, folding tables and emptying trash, but a growing unease gnawed at me. Every shadow looked like it moved independently, stretching and twitching under the fluorescent haze. By 1:15, I had made my way to the employee restroom. The door handle was cold under my fingers, the faint smell of bleach lingering from last week's cleaning. I hesitated, recalling Rule 3, stay out of the employee restroom after midnight, use the customer restroom if needed. Rational thought tried to argue what could possibly be dangerous in a small, windowless room, but a shiver ran down my spine and I obeyed, stepping past the door and heading toward the customer restroom. The fluorescent light flickered above me as I walked. Shadows pooled in the corners of the laundromat, and the hum of the dryers deepened into a low, resonant thrum that I felt more than heard. It was the kind of sound that makes your stomach tighten and your bones ache, vibrating through the floor. Inside the customer restroom, I tried to focus on mundane things, the harsh scent of soap, the cold tile under my shoes, the steady drip of the faucet, but the sense of being watched was impossible to shake. Every creak from the back storage room, every tap of a dryer vent sounded amplified, like the building itself was alive, listening. When I emerged, the laundromat was quieter than usual, too quiet. Washer 7's drum gleamed empty and motionless, but I couldn't look away. Something had changed. There was a subtle shift in the air, like static before a storm, a tension that pressed against my ears and made my pulse spike. I started my rounds again, faster this time, folding tables, trash cans, rows of dryers, rows of washers. Every corner seemed darker than it should, every shadow longer. Then I heard it, a faint scraping from the employee restroom door, followed by a low, wet sigh that made the hair on my arms rise. I froze. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were warnings. And now I understood why Rule 3 existed. Some things, I realized, are better left unseen, untouched, and I was learning the hard way. By 2 a.m., I was pacing, listening, afraid to turn my back to anything. Washer 7 hummed softly, the back storage room remained silent, and the employee restroom, well, I didn't want to know. By the 4th night, I was on edge before I even stepped into Sudsy's. The air outside felt heavier than usual, the night thick with humidity that clung to my skin. I arrived at 11:50, the neon open sign flickering faintly, its glow distorted in the wet pavement. Inside, the laundromat smelled sharper, a mix of detergent and the lingering metallic tang I had started associating with Washer 7. I slipped into my uniform, tugging at the collar, and tried to steady my nerves. Hours of solitude stretched ahead, punctuated by the occasional hum of a late-night customer. I made my usual rounds, folding tables, washers, dryers. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice. My pulse skipped. Then it happened, a third flicker, rapid and deliberate, like a signal. Rule 4, if the lights in the building flicker 3 times in a row, count to 30 before moving from wherever you're standing. My stomach dropped. I froze, counting silently, my eyes on the ceiling tiles. 1, 2, 3, 29, 30. Every muscle tensed as the light stabilized. When I finally moved, the laundromat felt wrong. Shadows clung to corners, stretching unnaturally across the worn carpet. The dryers hummed louder, more insistent, as if warning me to pay attention. My steps were cautious as I resumed my rounds, but the flicker had awakened something, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement out of the corner of my vision. As I approached Washer 7, I hesitated. The machine was still. But I knew better than to trust appearances. The air felt heavier around it, charged with a tension that made my hair stand on end. My hand brushed the counter, leaving a faint print, but the temperature didn't change. Or did it? My senses were on high alert, trying to detect what my rational mind refused to acknowledge. I glanced toward the back storage room. Nothing. Yet something whispered in my thoughts, a scraping, faint but deliberate. I turned, shaking my head, convincing myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, the side effects of working nights. But when I reached dryer 12, I heard it again, a low, wet thump, soft but distinct, like something heavy being dropped in rhythm with my pulse. My hands clenched into fists. Every rule was a lifeline, and I was walking closer to the edge with every step. Flickering lights, mysterious noises, Washer 7's silent threat. It was as if the laundromat itself had become a living entity, watching, waiting. By 1:30, the building was still except for the mechanical hum and occasional metallic click from the machines. But the tension didn't lift. If anything, it grew, thickening like smoke. I realized then that Rule 4 wasn't just about waiting, it was about survival. The flicker was a warning, a signal that the night was far from over and that obeying the rules was the only thing keeping me from becoming part of the machine itself. By the fifth night, the dread had settled into my bones like cold, wet iron. I arrived at Sudsy's at 11:45, the neon sign buzzing softly in the drizzle outside. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast that same sickly green glow over the rows of washers and dryers. The air smelled of detergent, damp carpet, and something metallic I could never quite place. I moved through my usual routine, checking machines, sweeping the floor, wiping down tables. The silence between customers was oppressive. Each thrum of the dryer sounded like a heartbeat, each click of a machine like a footstep approaching from behind. It was around 1:15 when I noticed it. Washer 7's door was open. My stomach sank. I had checked it on my last round. It had been empty, lifeless. Rule 5, do not approach washer number 7 if its door is open and you can see clothes inside but no customer is present. I stood frozen, staring at the dark drum. There were clothes inside, soaked and twisted, but no one had come in. No note, no sign of a missing customer. The water inside glistened unnaturally under the fluorescent light, almost like it was reflecting shadows that weren't there. A soft thumping began, like something struggling within the water, pushing against the sides. I told myself to stay back, don't move closer. But curiosity, that stupid human curiosity, clawed at me. I took a step. The thumping stopped. Silence, heavy and suffocating, pressed down on me. Then soft, wet, dragging sounds from inside the drum, moving in a deliberate rhythm. I swallowed hard, feeling bile rise. A shiver ran down my spine as I remembered Judy's words. If you didn't see a customer start it, leave it alone. But the door was open, and now the rule felt like a warning carved in stone, not a guideline. My legs felt like lead, my hands trembling. The room seemed to shrink, the other washers and dryers dissolving into shadow, leaving only me and the machine. I stepped back instinctively, nearly tripping over the folding table. The thumping grew louder, faster, like a heartbeat matching my own, and then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. The drum went still, the water calm, but the air smelled foul now, coppery, like blood mixed with detergent. I backed toward the counter, eyes fixed on washer 7. My mind was screaming, it's not just clothes in there. Something is alive, something is watching. I didn't dare approach again that night. I didn't sleep. And I knew, in the cold, unrelenting dark of Sudsy's, that obeying the rules wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. The sixth night was different. By 11:45, I was already on edge before I even turned the lock on Sudsy's door. The neon open sign flickered faintly, a weak pulse against the darkness outside. The air inside was thick, humid, carrying that familiar mix of detergent and metallic tang. Washer 7 loomed in the corner, quiet but menacing, its dark drum reflecting the dim green glow from the fluorescence. I moved through my usual rounds, but my eyes kept drifting toward the back storage room and the empty employee restroom. Everything felt wrong. I could sense it now. The building itself seemed aware of me, alive in the way that houses sometimes are in old ghost stories. Every click, every hum, every whisper of air felt purposeful. At 1:15, the first customer arrived, a man carrying 3 loads of laundry. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me, just set his clothes in the dryer and left. I watched him go, uneasy. There was something about the way he moved, stiff and unnatural, like he belonged more to the shadows than the light. Then I remembered Rule 6. If anyone asks about previous employees, tell them you're new and don't know anything. I laughed quietly at the thought, trying to brush off the tension. Who would ask about employees at 2 a.m.? Then, almost immediately, I heard it. A voice, low and wet, coming from the far end of the laundromat. "You're new," it hissed. My heart jumped. I turned toward the source. No one was there. Just the rows of washers, dryers, and the shadows curling like smoke. "Previous employees," it whispered again, just under my ear, though no one stood nearby. My skin prickled. I remembered the laminated card in my wallet, the 6 rules that had seemed absurd at first. Now they were warnings, and I understood why Rule 6 existed. People who didn't follow it didn't last. I backed toward the counter, eyes darting between washer 7, the storage room, and the empty space behind the dryers. Every sound dripping water, soft hums, the occasional metallic click felt amplified. The air smelled heavier, metallic now, thick and oppressive. The man at dryer 6 had returned silently, placing his clothes back in the basket and walking toward the exit. But when he passed, his face was pale, expressionless, and his eyes empty, hollowed out in a way that shouldn't exist in a living person. By 2 a.m., the laundromat was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of the building itself breathing around me. Washer 7 remained still, the back storage room dark, the employee restroom off limits. I realized then that the rules weren't just for guidance, they were shields. Each one kept me from the same fate as the shadows lurking just beyond my vision, waiting for the mistake I couldn't afford to make. By the seventh night, I was no longer just wary. I was terrified. The neon open sign outside flickered violently, a stuttered heartbeat that seemed to echo my own. Inside, sudsy smelled worse than ever detergent, damp carpet, and that metallic tang that I now associated with fear. Washer 7 sat in the corner, silent and dark, but I knew better than to trust it. Every rule I'd been given was alive in my mind, a fragile line between sanity and whatever lurked in the shadows. At 12:15, I began my rounds. The laundromat was empty except for the hum of the dryers and the low buzz of fluorescent lights above. Every corner seemed to stretch unnaturally, shadows pooling at impossible angles. The silence was broken by a soft thump from Washer 7. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched it. The drum was empty, or so I thought. Then came the scraping from the back storage room. Rule 2 screamed in my mind. Ignore sounds from the back storage room between 2 and 4 a.m. My pulse surged. The door shifted slightly, as though something heavy leaned against it from the inside. I didn't move. I couldn't. Even breathing felt dangerous. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, 3 times in a rapid burst. Rule 4, count to 30. I froze, heart hammering, counting each second, aware of the low metallic hum that now sounded like whispered breathing all around me. 30 seconds later, I forced my legs to move. Everything felt wrong. The air itself seemed charged, thick with a tension that pressed against my skin and ears. By 1:30, Washer 7's door had inexplicably opened. Rule 5, do not approach. I stayed frozen, watching the drum, close, wet and dark, tumbled slowly, though no one had started the machine. A thumping sound, wet and deliberate, pulsed from inside. Something moved among the fabric, but it was wrong, shapes twisted, shadows curling in ways that defied the dim light. At the same time, I caught a shadow slipping past the employee restroom. Rule 3, stay out of it! My mind raced. The building seemed alive, whispering warnings in every hum and squeak. Washer 7, the back storage room, the forbidden restroom, they all pulsed with a single intent. By 2 a.m., I was pacing, unable to stop. The rules weren't just rules anymore. They were lifelines, shields against the growing presence that filled the laundromat with something sentient, something waiting. Every second I broke one of them, or even came close, I felt the walls breathe closer, the shadows stretch farther. I realized then, fully and irreversibly, that this night would be different. Something had woken. And I was running out of rules. By the 8th night, I didn't bother pretending I was calm. 11:55, I turned the lock on Sudsies and stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly as if warning me. The air was heavier than ever, dense with the metallic scent that had become impossible to ignore. Washer 7 sat in the corner like a sleeping predator, its dark drum glinting in the sickly green glow. I moved on instinct, checking dryers, folding tables, and the empty spaces between machines. The laundromat felt alive, every hum and click amplified into a whisper that followed me. At 12:45, I noticed it, an unusual ripple in the water inside Washer 7. Nothing had been put there, yet the liquid moved as though something beneath the surface was testing its limits. A soft scraping came from the back storage room, intermittent, deliberate. Rule 2 rang in my mind. Ignore it. Do not investigate. My chest tightened. My legs wanted to move toward it anyway. The door shivered slightly, almost mocking me. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then came the flicker. Fluorescence stuttered once, twice, 3 times. Rule 4, count to 30. I froze mid-step, counting slowly, each second stretching into eternity. By the time 30 passed, the air had thickened, and the metallic scent was sharper, almost iron-like. Washer 7's drum thumped again, wet and heavy, like something inside had weight and intent. At 1:15, the door of Washer 7 creaked open wider. Rule 5, do not approach! I wanted to run, to lock myself behind the counter, but fear rooted me to the floor. Shapes moved inside the drum, too dark to be clothes, too deliberate to be anything ordinary. My skin prickled, my mind screaming for me to retreat. I could feel it watching from the back storage room, its presence crawling along the walls, bending shadows, pressing against my vision. Even the employee restroom seemed complicit, its darkness pooling with menace. Every rule I'd been given now felt like a fragile thread keeping me tethered to safety. One mistake, and I knew the laundromat would consume me. And then a wet, guttural noise emanated from Washer 7. Something inside shifted sharply, and I felt a pull, a vibration through the floor that traveled straight into my bones. I staggered back, pressed against the folding tables, and realized the truth. This was no ordinary night. The rules were not suggestions. They were survival instructions, and I had reached the point where obedience alone might not be enough. By 2 a.m., I was trapped in the center of the laundromat, eyes darting between washer 7, the back storage room, and the employee restroom. Every second stretched, every shadow moved, and I knew that what I had been waiting for, what had been stirring all along, was ready to make itself known. But a night, fear had become a living thing inside Sudsy's. I arrived at 11:50, sliding into my polo shirt with trembling hands. The neon open sign buzzed faintly, a warning pulse against the darkened streets. Inside, the air was thick with that metallic tang, the damp carpet clinging to my shoes. Washer 7 sat in the corner, still and menacing, but I no longer trusted silence. At 12:30, I began my rounds. The laundromat was empty except for the humming dryers and my own shallow breathing. Then I heard it, a scraping from the back storage room, soft at first, then louder, deliberate, as if whatever was inside was testing its boundaries. My stomach twisted. Rule 2, ignore it. Do not investigate. I froze, trying to convince myself to obey. But the sound escalated. A wet thump reverberated from washer 7, deep and resonant. The door, previously closed, had swung open on its own. Rule 5, do not approach. My legs moved before my mind could stop them. Step by cautious step, I approached, drawn by something I didn't want to see. Inside the drum, shapes writhed, dark, fluid, and impossible to define. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the laundromat, shaking the tables and counters. My pulse raced as the fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, 3 times. Rule 4, count to 30. My hands pressed to my ears as I counted, feeling the vibrations pulse in my chest, in my bones, and my very skull. By the time I finished, the drum erupted. Something slithered upward, wet and black, spilling over the edge, reaching for me. I stumbled backward, crashing into the folding tables. The smell hit me, coppery, metallic, acrid. The shape was fast, unnatural, a mass of wet shadow that moved with purpose and intelligence. From the back storage room came a crash like furniture thrown to the floor. The employee restroom door rattled violently. Rule 3 screamed in my mind, stay out! But every instinct told me that everything in the building was moving together now, converging, hunting. I scrambled toward the counter, heart hammering. Washer 7 thumped again as if marking time, as if it had a rhythm all its own. The black mass hissed and surged, and I understood the truth. The laundromat wasn't haunted, it was alive. And Rule 1 through 6 weren't instructions, they were warnings to keep me from becoming part of it. By 1:30, I was cornered near the front door, every shadow a potential threat. My only thought, survive the night. I had no idea how, only that the rules were my lifeline, and breaking one now might be the end. By the 10th night, the dread had transformed into something sharper, anticipatory, electric. I arrived at 11:50, the neon open sign flickering like a stuttering pulse. Inside, the air was thick and clinging, damp carpet underfoot, the metallic scent I had learned to dread curling into my lungs. Washer 7 sat silent in the corner, its dark drum reflecting the greenish glow of the fluorescence like a predator's eye. At 12:15, the first sound struck, a scraping from the back storage room. My pulse spiked. Rule 2, ignore it. But ignoring it now felt impossible. The scraping grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate, like something dragging across concrete. I froze, hands clenched at my sides, counting my breath, willing myself not to move. Then came the thump from washer 7, wet, deliberate, pulsing with life. Its door creaked open wider, and the darkness inside seemed to shift, coil, almost breathe. Rule 5, do not approach. My legs refused to listen. Drawn like a moth to flame, I inched closer, every step heavy with fear. The drum quivered violently. Shadows inside twisted and writhed, and a low, guttural hiss echoed through the laundromat, rattling the fluorescent lights. They flickered violently, once, twice, 3 times. Rule 4, count to 30. My chest tightened as I counted, each second stretching into eternity, while the shadows seemed to stretch with it, growing darker, more intent. At 1:30, a wet, glistening shape surged from washer 7. I stumbled back, crashing into a folding table, and the metallic tang filled my senses like blood and water. The mass of shadow surged forward with intelligence, crawling across the floor, sliding under the rows of dryers like liquid darkness. Simultaneously, the back storage room erupted. A heavy crash shook the walls, followed by a scraping thud moving toward me. The employee restroom door rattled violently, like something inside was trying to escape. Rule 3 screamed in my mind, stay out! But the rules now felt insufficient. They weren't enough to protect me. They were merely warnings I had barely survived by following. I backed toward the counter, heart hammering. Washer Seven's drum thumped again, the black mass shifting like a living creature reaching, testing intent. The lights flickered violently overhead, casting elongated, writhing shadows across the floor. Every corner of the laundromat felt alive, watching, waiting. I realized with stark clarity that the night wasn't just about obeying the rules anymore, it was about survival. And if I made one wrong move, even a single misstep, the laundromat would claim me, silent, inevitable, unstoppable. By the 11th night, the air in Sudsy's was thick with anticipation, oppressive and wet. 11:55, I turned the lock on the door, the neon sign flickering weakly as if warning me again. I didn't breathe normally anymore. My lungs seemed to choke on the metallic tang that hung in the air. Washer 7 sat in the corner, dark and silent. But I knew better than to trust that silence. By 12:15, the first tremor of movement reached my ears, a scraping from the back storage room, faint but deliberate. I froze, heart hammering. Rule 2, ignore it, do not investigate. But ignoring it was impossible. Every nerve in my body screamed that whatever was in there was alive, aware, and hungry. Then Washer 7 thumped, a wet, heavy sound that echoed through the building. Its door creaked open wider, and the dark water inside shifted unnaturally. Rule 5, do not approach. My legs betrayed me, inching forward, compelled by a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The drum quivered violently, then exploded outward. A shadowy mass surged across the floor, wet and slithering, moving with predatory intelligence. At the same time, the back storage room door rattled violently. A crash followed, loud enough to make the ceiling tile shake. The employee restroom door banged repeatedly, like something trying to escape, like claws scratching at the inside of the wood. Rule 3, stay out! I stayed, paralyzed, trapped between the thrashing shadows and the oppressive building itself. Fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, 3 times. Rule 4, count to 30. My heart beat in my ears as I obeyed, trembling, sweat rolling down my spine. 30 seconds later, the darkness in the drum surged again, rising higher, forming shapes vaguely humanoid, limbs stretching and twisting in impossible ways. The metallic scent was overpowering, coppery, clinging to every breath. By 1:30, the black mass from Washer 7 lunged, wet and fast, almost intelligent in its movement. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse as if the building itself was alive, complicit. Every corner of Sudsy's writhed with menace, shadows stretching, walls breathing. I backed against the counter, trapped, understanding finally that the rules weren't just survival, they were shields. Without them, I would already be claimed. I clenched my fists, eyes locked on the thrashing mass, counting the seconds between beats of the thumping drum. Every rule had brought me here, obedient, terrified, ready to face the thing I had spent 10 nights fearing. There was no escape except through confrontation, and somehow I knew I had to survive or be consumed entirely. By the 12th night, the laundromat was alive in a way I could no longer ignore. 11:58, I stepped inside, heart hammering in rhythm with the hum of the fluorescent lights. Washer 7 loomed in the corner like a predator waiting for its next meal. The metallic tang in the air was sharper, heavier, almost solid. I knew that tonight everything would come to a head. At 12:15, the first warning came, the scraping from the back storage room. Rule 2. I froze, counting my breaths, every muscle taut. The door shuddered violently, then went still, as if whatever had been inside was waiting, watching. Washer 7 thumped once, wet and heavy, then again in a pulse that matched the building's unnatural heartbeat. The door of Washer 7 creaked open wider. Rule 5, do not approach. I didn't move. My eyes, wide and unblinking, watched the water shift. Shadows twisted within, shapes that weren't closed, shapes that were alive. A guttural hiss emerged from the drum, wet and slithering, almost intelligent. My stomach churned. The employee restroom rattled violently. Rule 3. The fluorescent lights flickered 3 times. Rule 4. I counted the 30 seconds slowly, deliberately, each second dragging into eternity. The metallic smell intensified, acrid and coppery, clinging to my skin and lungs. The back storage room door banged once, then again a deep, hollow thump that made the floor vibrate. By 1:30, the shadows surged. Washer 7's mass lunged, wet and agile, colliding with the floor, thrashing with a terrifying awareness. The building seemed to pulse, walls stretching, the laundromat alive in every corner. Every rule I had followed, every step of obedience had brought me here. The rules were my shields, and I had to use them. I lunged, pushing a folding table between myself and the thrashing mass. It hissed and recoiled as if struck. The shadows from the back storage room receded slightly, and the restroom fell silent. Washer 7 shuddered, then still. The drum stopped spinning. Slowly, the air lightened, the metallic tang fading. The building exhaled, quiet, dormant. By 6 a.m., I was alone, trembling behind the counter. The sun rose, soft and golden, casting long, ordinary shadows over Sudsy's. Washer 7 stood still, silent and empty. The rules had held. I had survived. But I knew one thing. The laundromat waited, patient, eternal, ready to test the next soul who dared to work the night shift. And I would never, ever forget the 6 rules or the night the building almost took me.